The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Hey everybody, let's rock on another edition of Need to Know. Keefer here. Told you last week we've kind of repackaged the show a little bit in some transition here. I apologize for the lack of video on this presentation. We're working on getting that back up and running. But it'll just be pretty much words and still pictures today, and I appreciate you all for bearing with me. Had a lot of changes going on in my life right now, and a lot of adjustments being made, but still have some strong opinions and hopefully a few ideas to convey to you that maybe you did not know or need to know, and also just the general aspect of the theme of this show. If you're tuning in for the first time, I have no intention of telling you what to think or how to think. I just want to encourage you to think and think for yourself. That's the theme of Need to Know. I'm really excited and intrigued and in some cases disturbed as we come upon the anniversary in about a month and a half from now, July 4th, 2026. It will be the 250th celebration of the 4th of July, Independence Day, here in the United States. And that's a big milestone, 250 years, a long, long time, going all the way back to 1776, and that July day. And I say that because it was not actually July 4th, when the Declaration was signed by all of the Continental Congress delegates. It was actually not delegates, delegates, let me enunciate there. It was actually on July 2nd, but the document, as you know, in those days, not a printing press readily available. Copies needed to be made, a lot of reproduction and different things. It was not actually sanctioned until the 4th of July, which is why the holiday is on that day. But anyway, it's close enough. July 4th is the official day, and that'll be birthday number 250, a big deal, of course, in this country, another milestone that we're witnessing in our lifetime, and we're all privileged to be able to do that. The Continental Congress, over these next few weeks here, I Need to Know, I want to spend some time telling you some facts about the Continental Congress, the people that were actually there representing the colonies at that time, and coming together for really a bold act. I don't think enough Americans are aware that this wasn't just a convention, a meeting, a bunch of guys getting together and, hey, I got a good idea, let's try this, let's do that. Every single person at the Continental Congress representing their colony were British citizens, citizens of the crown, citizens of King George of England at the time. They were British subjects. And for these guys, although they were living in America, still under British control, the colonies were British colonies. These guys came together in Philadelphia and did something that required an unbelievable amount of audacity and courage, because these guys, by signing the Declaration of Independence, were committing treason against their country and their king. And treason, back in those days, not very touchy-feely. Treason was almost always handled in the same way: death by hanging. Now, these are big leaders. These are important people. A lot of, guys that were wealthy and successful that had a lot to lose. The same bravery and bravado that had brought these guys to this new land, looking for a new start and a new beginning, was displayed again at the Continental Convention in 1776 in Philadelphia, because by putting their signature on this document, they basically exposed themselves to a possible death sentence. And that's not being dramatic. That is absolutely a fact, that the British government could have arrested all these guys and executed them for treason. And many were later, retribution was taken against a lot of the signers of this as the American Revolution raged on. Houses were burned to the ground and things of that nature. But this was, again, a act of tremendous courage and boldness by the people at that convention. I think I told this story last year on July 4th, but it absolutely is one of my favorite aspects. And if you didn't hear it, I want you to hear it again, because the president, the guy elected to be the head man at the Continental Congress for the 1776 monumental meeting, where they were considering breaking away from the crown and from England and declaring themselves their own country, the United States of America. The man in charge was from Virginia, and this man's name was Peyton Randolph. Now, don't feel bad, although Americans are absolutely terrible right now in terms of understanding or knowing anything about American history. And if you're not one of them, I apologize. I'm just talking about the overwhelming majority of Americans don't have any knowledge, seemingly don't have any interest in the history of our country and the luminary figures that made it happen. Peyton Randolph, don't feel bad if you have never heard of this guy. Peyton Randolph, who should have been famous all the way down through history and still talked about today as president of the Continental Congress, who broke away from the crown and formed the United States of America by instituting the Declaration of Independence. Before they got to that point, while it was still being debated, Peyton Randolph left Philadelphia and went back to Virginia. Now, historians vary on why he did that. It is pretty much agreed that some sort of health issue, some kind of illness prompted the decision. There are some historians that write that Randolph himself was suffering from some kind of malady and had to leave the convention. Others are pretty certain, this is actually what I believe, that someone back home, whether it was his wife or child, somebody back in Virginia was in a serious way, and that prompted Randolph from leaving. By him doing that, the congressmen, the people that were there, the Continental Congress, which, again, to call it Congress was a little bit of a stretch, because it's not the Congress that we know today that are, of course, representatives from each state. These guys were colonial representatives, British citizens, but the Congress voted a new man to be on that podium, and this is a guy that I know you've heard of, or almost 90% of you have heard of, because with Peyton Randolph's departure, John Hancock took over as president of the Continental Congress. Now, John Hancock, people know, of course, for a couple of reasons. I found it hilarious when I was telling somebody this story a few years ago and thought that he would instantly recognize the name John Hancock, and he did. But when I asked him, so you know who John Hancock is? He says, well, yeah, I've heard of him. It's an insurance company. It must be named after him. That's not exactly what John Hancock goes down in history for. John Hancock, although, yes, there is an insurance company named John Hancock that's still operating today. I think it's been in business for 100 years. I don't think the original John Hancock had anything to do with it except for lending his name to this company. But John Hancock was the first guy when the Declaration of Independence was finally drafted, Thomas Jefferson basically went into a room for 2 days and didn't come out, didn't use any previous writings, didn't have any books. He was absolutely determined that he wanted to go sit down based on all the ideas that had been presented and debated over the first couple of weeks of this group being together. He wanted to draft a very precise and original document because Jefferson believed above all else that we didn't need to follow the lead of any place else in the world that had ever even flirted with the idea of a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Jefferson wanted to come up with something so refreshing and unusual and innovative that it was going to be uniquely American. And he really believed that was the assignment. Of course, the Greeks and the Romans had experimented with representative government, and it had ended badly. Factionalism doing in every civilization that had tried any government like this. And when I say factionalization, everybody should identify with that because it's happening right now. Different factions of groups in our country right now are absolutely determined to try to seize control and one-up each other. Control and being the party in charge, and to use parties wrong, the ideology in charge, because it's not so much parties anymore. This is different ideas on exactly how our country should function. But factionalism has been the cause of every major attempt to have citizen government. Has been the reason that it's ultimately failed, and we, and I'll get into this in a moment, are on a disturbing path where that road is certainly one that we have stumbled onto, and we do not need to continue in that direction, or we're going to suffer the same fate. So John Hancock put his name on the document first. The first signature is John Hancock's as president of the Continental Congress. So the first guy to put his life on the line was the guy appointed to take the place of the departed Peyton Randolph. And John Hancock wrote his signature with tremendous care and clarity and legibility and great size. It was bold, it was big, and somebody said, "Gee, John, that was kind of prolific there." And his response was, "Well, when King George reads this document, I want him to see my signature clearly without having to put on his spectacles." That was Hancock's response. That was the biggest, here's the finger for you, King. I'm John Hancock, and I sign off on this. What do the politicians say now? I approve this message. Well, with his middle finger squarely in the air, John Hancock pointed toward the Atlantic Ocean and across to the great British Empire and gave King George the finger with his giant, bold signature. Everybody else signed it, including the South Carolina delegation, which until the night before this was supposed to happen, there was a lot of wrangling over Jefferson's language. There were people that didn't agree with certain passages that he wrote. But when the final vote came, all of the colonies, except South Carolina, voted to approve this Constitution. Or, excuse me, it's not the Constitution. I'll get into that in a moment. This Declaration of Independence. South Carolina's representatives went back the next night, and everybody was kind of slumping and defeated because they really wanted consensus. It was very important for this group of colonies to all come together and support what they wanted to do as far as breaking away. And South Carolina basically was declaring they couldn't sign it unless there was major changes, which was holding up the whole show. That night, the leader of their delegation convinced his other constituents or other compadres that, you know what, we've got some problems with this, but in concept, it's more important for us to sign off on this and be 100% in support and solidarity with our other colonies It's more important than any kind of petty differences we have of the big picture. And for so many years in our country, that's how we operated. You had a lot of disagreement, a lot of disputes over the years in so many areas. People say these are the most divisive times we've ever lived in. Well, I gotta disagree with that. We actually had a complete war between two factions of our country, geographic factions, philosophically different factions, ideologically different, but this was an actual war where 600,000 Americans died. So to call this the most divisive time is really laughable, because this is nothing compared to 1860 to 1865. But anyway, South Carolina signed on, and it was really the symbol for what America was supposed to be. That at the end of the day, you did what was best for your country. You did what was best for your citizens. You did what was best for your states, your homes, your livelihood. You didn't worry about who was in control. You didn't get into these ridiculous disputes, and it's just a power struggle, because now whoever has the power controls the money. And the money is what determines everything, the direction you're going to go, the ideological stance you're going to take. It's the most lucrative enterprise in the world, the United States federal government, and whoever controls that controls everything. And that's why we are in a bad spot right now, 250 years down the road, of this becoming more important than country. South Carolina saw it 250 years ago, that we need to get on board here so everybody's on the same page. We are losing that right now, folks, and may have lost it, because right now, and I used the word party before improperly, because this is not a party situation. We've got to, and I've said this to you many times on this show, we've got to get away from this as Republican versus Democrat, red versus blue, right versus left. That's more accurate now, but it's not so much right and it's not so much left. It's moderate right and way, way left. We are beyond left. We are into the other territory of complete radical disruption. There is no Democrat Party anymore. Let's get serious. Barack Obama said it this week. Barack Obama said, I don't know why we're slow to embrace the direction our party's going, because there's a lot of what you would call traditional Democrats. And I'd say a lot, that's a wrong word, because there are a handful that still have that kind of a philosophy, that the Democrats need to be, kind of center left. But that's not the direction right now the Democrat Party's taken. They've taken radical left. They've taken socialism left. They've taken communist left. You've got a communist mayor of New York City right now his platform is to just tax unbelievably punitively everybody who's successful, even people that are moderately successful. Take from everybody that's producing and give to everybody who's not doing anything. And that system does not work. It hasn't worked any place in the world it's ever been tried. You eventually run out of everybody else's money to spend. It does not work. So we've got a real problem right now in this country, and it's so bitter and it's so divisive. In the state of Virginia, it's a perfect microcosm for what's going on. Virginia, after the election of a Republican governor, Glenn Youngkins, for previous years, which was a shocking thing, because all of the northern part of Virginia is inhabited by people that work in Washington, D.C. They're all federal government employees, and they're all way, way left. These are the federal government bureaucrats. We're supposed to have three branches of government in this country: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. But we've got a fourth branch, which I've told you about before, and it was never intended by the founders of our country. It's the administrative branch. We have so many agencies, so many bureaus, so many different entities that have all kinds of power and all kinds of leverage to spend money and to make decisions that affect all of our lives. The administrative branch is maybe arguably the most powerful of the three now, because it has multitudes more people, and it is most of the money that is being spent and wasted and given away and fraudulently being accessed in any number of thousands of different scams and different scandals. So our federal government is in disarray right now, but Northern Virginia pretty much controlled by that crowd. So for a Republican to win the governor race in back when 4 years ago until this last year, when Spanberger, who campaigned, she said she was a moderate and she was going to maintain a lot of the Youngkin policies. Well, that was a big lie. She became elected, and on day one, she threw out every policy Glenn Youngkin had instituted and started this radical agenda because the legislature was totally controlled by Democrats. And Spanberger's first move was to try and make sure that there was going to be no Republican representation in Virginia basically at all. Virginia, in the last presidential election, Donald Trump got 46% of the vote. That means it's about a 50-50 state, Republican and Democrat. It is completely different geographically. As I mentioned, in the northern part of the state, almost 100% blue, Democrat. In the southern part of the state, central and southern part, which is not nearly as populated, but it is almost ridiculously red, conservative Republican. I saw one county in the last presidential race. Donald Trump got 96% of the vote in that one county in southeastern South Carolina, in Virginia. So, I mean, it's a radically different state, but it is pretty much divided. But Spanberger's new congressional redistricting plan that they ramrodded through the legislature, despite they have a state constitution, and the state constitution lays out very specific timelines of how long you need to advertise you're going to do this, how much time there needs to be between the election, and they ignored and violated every rule that they had in their constitution, their state constitution, of how to conduct that election. They just ramrodded it. They declared a day just a couple of months down the road, and they had an election about a month ago, and by 1.5%, the measure passed, which took the 11 congressional districts in Virginia, which before were 7 Democrat, 4 Republican, but this completely redrew the map. And the map was drawn in such a bizarre way, it looked like giant octopi all over the state. There were these little, like, extended legs that went up into certain areas. It was carefully crafted to give Democrats an overwhelming majority in 10 of the 11 congressional districts. So basically, you were going to go from a state that was traditionally 6-5 with a slight edge to Democrats, currently 7-4, to 10-1 in terms of their members in Congress. Of course, the other side sued, and the Virginia Supreme Court did the only thing they could do, because their job is to interpret the law. According to the Virginia Constitution, everything about this election was absolutely bogus. You couldn't just declare that we're going to have a vote on this without going through the steps that are prescribed by your Constitution, which is the lifeblood, and we'll talk about the U.S. Constitution in just a moment here. But the bottom line is the court did exactly what the court should have done. The Supreme Court of Virginia overturned the special election and said they can't do this. They violated all of state law conducting this illegal election. Well, now the reaction, and this is just classic, the governor announced today a new plan that they are going to try to run a bill through the legislature that requires the Virginia Supreme Court mandatory age of retirement, which now is 75. If this bill passes, the bill is going to call for the mandatory retirement age for Virginia justices to be 54. Guess the age of the youngest person on right now, the Virginia Supreme Court. 54. So you know what? We don't like the game. We don't like how it goes. We don't like the decision by the court. So we don't want to just move the goalpost. We want to remove the goalpost. We want to take down the fence. We want to fire everybody in the Supreme Court by changing the age of forced retirement and install our own people in, younger people, more ideological people. And that's their solution to this big problem, because they don't have a leg to stand on constitutionally in this argument. And that's the kind of mobocracy, and we talked about our country not being a democracy. A democracy is just a simple majority, but a mobocracy is like what happened in France in the French Revolution, where everybody was losing their heads because the mob took to the streets and took complete control of everything. We can't have mobocracy. We have to have constitutional provisions. But I pivot back to what I was talking about, us being under siege right now, because so few Americans have any knowledge of our government or the workings of it. And it's not a mystery why that is. Do you know that in American schools, and this includes private schools, parochial schools, public schools, only 16%, 16 out of 100 schools in the United States right now have any inclusion of civics in their curriculum. And some of them are minuscule. I don't know what the qualifications were of how many class hours or how much time would be devoted. But when I went to school, I took civics, I took American government, I took American history, which there were extensive chapters on how the Declaration of Independence was drafted and how the Constitution came to be. Do you know that an alarming amount of Americans, I've read two different numbers, anywhere from low 60s, 62% to 73% of Americans can't tell you the difference between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Most people in that survey thought that was just an extension of the same document. The Declaration of Independence, as we just talked about, was signed in July 1776. The war was fought with the British, and the United States Constitution, which was not a Declaration of Independence, the independence was won in the Revolutionary War. The Constitution was the drafting of the document that was going to describe how our government was going to be formed, what everybody's responsibilities were going to be, and the belief was a limited size federal government. The emphasis was going to be on the states to do most of the governing. The federal government was going to be just kind of a small overseer for security of the nation as a whole and a few other administrative functions. But the Constitution is, as I mentioned in Virginia, as same for our country, it is the lifeblood of our society. There's an executive branch that answers to the legislative branch, the elected congressional officials, the Senate and House of Representatives. And then if there are disputes between those two, the deciding party, the third branch, is the judicial. That is, of course, the court system. If any of these three are corrupted, then the other two are responsible to step in and get things corrected. It was an ingenious way to put this into place. We didn't anticipate the great fourth branch, the administrative state, which has unbelievable power because these people basically can't be fired and have power that the drafters of our Constitution never envisioned. It's really distressing from the standpoint that these people, all of these bureaus, agencies, departments, none of them conceived by our founders, the framers, have come to fore and now are dominant powers in our government. So we've got a lot of problems right now. We've got to get back to the basics of understanding that we have a Constitution that we need to abide by. Democrats, unbelievably, who've been screaming from the rooftops that it's a threat to our democracy. Democracy is threatened. The maneuvering of the Republican Party is taking away the rights of the American people. But in the same breath, they turn around and they just want to blow up everything the Constitution calls for. We can't lose. We lost that decision and the Supreme Court ruled against us. So we're just going to try in the federal level. We're going to get control and we're going to get a provision passed to put on a bunch of new people into the Supreme Court. Instead of 9, they want to go to 13, maybe even 15. And with the majority, if they get control again, they will put in a majority of all of their people in those positions where they can never lose power because they'll never lose another case in the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court will no longer consider constitutional law. They will consider partisan agendas. And that is the death knell of this society and this country with our founding principles. So scary times indeed. Let's hope that cooler heads prevail. Let's hope that we get, and again, I'm not advocating one side or the other. I'm just telling you where the threat is right now. Only 16% of schools teach civics, and 60% of Americans right now could not pass a simple citizenship test. That's ridiculously easy. If you don't get 100 on it, I just don't know where you come from or what you were taught or not taught. I can tell what you were not taught. But the bottom line is we've got a whole group of people running around who know nothing about their country, don't know anything about how it's structured, don't understand that communism and socialism don't work, because in 1978, in the Jimmy Carter administration, the Federal Department of Education, another bureau, agency, department that the founders would never have formed, was formed for one purpose: to start changing education in this country to make people ignorant of how their country works and how the Constitution defines every aspect of our lives. You've got people that can't tell you the most basic facts, and it's scary because these people are still allowed to go to the ballot box and vote, not to mention the fact that they've imported millions of illegals into this country and given them the ability to go to the polls. So you've got people voting that are not even from here, who are just here for the handouts, and their part of the deal is to participate and help the controlling group that wants to seize control and keep control forever, and they're not shy about it. Obama, as I mentioned this week, met with congressional representatives from the Democratic Party and said, we need to embrace, this is our chance to seize control and we'll never have to give it back. And if that happens, this country as we know it is gone. This will become the great world bureau, kumbaya partner, the great provider for the rest of the world until we bankrupt ourselves and become a third world country on our own. This is the greatest country ever conceived. The American dream is still alive and well and available to anybody who wants to roll up their sleeves and work for it and do the right things. The life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is still very much in place. But on our 250th birthday, you have to understand, if you're an American citizen, you have a responsibility as an American citizen to step up, to be knowledgeable about your country, to not sheepishly stand in the corner if somebody's bad-mouthing your country. You've got to stand up. Your voice has to be heard. I don't understand how we have this generation of lily-livered chickens who shy away from any kind of debate. I know the other side is louder and more demonstrative and more radical and more threatening, but American voices need to be heard, and we saw that happen in the 2024 election when Donald Trump had a sweeping victory, carrying about 87% of the counties in the entire country, let alone all of the swing states, of course, losing the obvious ones, the Californias and New Yorks. But those might be changing. California could be on the verge of putting Republican politicians in because so many people have left that state, and New York is in the same boat as Mondami the commie, the new communist mayor of New York, runs people off that have been successful by taxing them excessively. And you can't keep going back to that well because people aren't going to put up with it. Florida and Texas and Tennessee are getting these huge influxes of population from people fleeing California, Illinois, New York, Massachusetts. The country is reforming, but we've got to survive this time right now to get to the stabilization point and keep America great as it was intended by our founders. The most genius conception plans. Go back and review your constitutional law. It is amazing how these guys saw all of this coming and tried to build in safeguards to keep it from happening, where mobocracy can't rise up and take over this great dream, this audacious experiment we call the United States of America. Happy birthday, America 250. We'll be talking more about the Continental Congress and other fun facts in the coming weeks. I'm Kip Keefer. Thank you all for tuning in here on TKR. That's what you need to know.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.